very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And today we are joined by an amazing guest, George Haymaker III. He's the founder of the Brain Club and an applied neuroscience educator. His work focuses on retraining the brain to move from constant internal activation back to clarity, calm, and high capacity for performance. And today we are set to discuss that how you can master your brain, not only just mindset, because a lot of people discuss that how you can just gain the mindset, but if you know the internal chemistry of your brain, it becomes so easier to master your brain and mindset. So let's begin our conversation and let's welcome George. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Ambreen. It's so great to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on, and I'm excited to speak to all your guests.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm also so excited to actually have this conversation about like neuroscience, psychology, and mastering the brain. As you know, like it is very close to my heart to understand more about brain and how it works, especially neuroscience aspect. So yeah, let's begin our conversation. But before we begin our conversation, let's just tell us about yourself, that how you started your journey and what struggles you faced when you started to actually have this ambition to focus more on brain and understanding brains.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my entree into this field was a result of life circumstances. I did not set out to be involved in neuroscience. I actually realized at an early age I wanted to be an entrepreneur with, businesses, products and services mostly, and that's where my career path took me. I did have an unstable upbringing, so there was lots of moving around early in my life. My dad was a corporate climber, so I was in new schools about every year.
Mhm.
I came from a generation and a household that had a lot of discipline in it.
Mhm.
My parents moved overseas when I was in ninth grade, so I was left here in the United States going to boarding school to kind of fend for myself. So I was just fairly unsettled and lacking confidence, struggling with self-esteem from a fairly early age, filled with anxiety. And so those are the mental patterns that I had and developed early on, and I took them with me into my business life. And so I was operating businesses in different industries, different sizes, but really struggling underneath mentally. And I
Mhm.
just didn't know that that was unusual or abnormal or that anything could be done about it. I knew nothing about the brain. I just expected it to perform and be there for me. I just pushed it, and didn't really think twice about what it needed to perform well. And so I navigated my life up until the age of 50 that way. And I would get so stressed out and so activated that I found that drinking alcohol helped me calm down. And so that was kind of my coping pattern through 30 years. For 30 years in my professional life, as I would work really hard, get really anxious, and then wind down with alcohol. And so that worked okay, but I was still struggling and uncomfortable mentally. And then at the age of 50, I became addicted to alcohol and pain pills, and had to go into rehab. And it was at that point, that was the turning point in my life at 52, when I was in rehab and kind of looking at the walls and wondering how my life had gotten to that point. And I realized that my way of living was not um, very pleasant, and I wasn't happy or fulfilled, and I knew it wasn't sustainable. I mean, I was close to dying at that point. And so I decided that I would try again, but do it differently, because I had had 30 years of proof that what I was doing wasn't working well. And so I said, you know something, let me learn about my brain. What has gone on with it? Why am I so uncomfortable? Why Did I get addicted? What does an addicted brain look like? Can I change? What's involved in changing neurologically? Because I knew nothing. And so that started my path for the next 13 years of diving deep into psychology, spirituality, ultimately neuroscience. And I just loved it. I loved the subject matter. It was so interesting to me. And it was so hopeful because I began to realize as I studied that I wasn't stuck with any of the mental experience I had, and it could change. And so that immediately just lifted a large weight off my shoulders, knowing that if I just was patient and learned and listened to other people, that I could actually, my life could get better. And so that's what happened. For the next 13 years, I began to, my health improved, my psychology improved, my mental experience improved as I was applying what I was learning to myself. And I just became so in love with it and realized the difference it could make for everyone, whether you're struggling with addiction or deep-seated mental patterns or not. The brain is just an amazing organ, and it has so much possibility, and we can guide and direct it any way that we want and affect its performance and create any mental experience that we want. And so I just am trying to sing from the mountaintops for people that you just cannot believe how much value there is in learning how your brain functions and what you can do with that knowledge.
Wow. I mean, I think it's very relatable for lots of people because I see a lot of people who are going in that same pattern. They get stuck, and as you say, they resort to like all those negative habits like drinking alcohol or maybe addiction to more uh, like Netflix binging or any like these kind of things that they want to actually remove their stress from. But at the end of the day, what they think that their coping mechanism is calming down, but actually it is doing more something worse than to their brain rather than fixing it. So, but you said that like you realize that these strategies are not working, but when we see around a lot of people are addicted to it. So what do you think that how they can change what or you said that what made you exactly realize that these these things need to change? What was the moment when you said, okay, I think it's enough, I think it's time to change?
Well, the answer to that question is I was about to die. I was taking a lot of pain pills and drinking a lot of vodka every day because addiction had grabbed a hold of me. And that's a whole nother discussion of what happens in the brain when it becomes addicted and why you need to keep using and drinking in order to just feel somewhat normal. Otherwise, the withdrawals are so painful that you'll do anything to get more. So unfortunately, for me, I had to get the consequences and the costs of living life that way had to get really bad for me to change. And the problem that we have is we don't understand how the brain works. And so we don't know what to do differently. And so that's why I'm just so encouraging of people, whether it's working with me or on your own, learning about how the brain functions so that you can understand what's happening, why it's happening, what the brain is trying to accomplish, and what you can do about it. All of us have a really good idea of how to do a lot of things in our life. We're good at our jobs, we're good at our hobbies, all kinds of things. But in order to be proficient and skillful, we have to understand it and practice it, right? When we were in school, we had to study. So the brain, your mental outcome experience is not fixed. It can be different. The brain will give you a different experience, but it's not going to do it on its own. It has to be guided and directed. You don't expect that you're going to wake up every day and have a perfect body. You know that you're going to have to go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, eat right, all of that. Those are inputs to having a good physical experience. The same thing applies to your brain. It is a malleable, shapeable, evolvable organ that can be affected by how we resource it and how we interpret things. Okay, how we train it, work with it, take information from it, do things with that information. It is an interactive, trainable organ.
Yeah.
And so the problem where we run into an issue is we don't know that, and then we don't know how to go about it. So we just kind of let things evolve the way that they're going to evolve and leave the brain to do its own thing. And that's just not good business, so to speak, because don't we want control over how well it operates? You know, we don't expect that our car engine is going to operate perfectly forever. We know that we have to maintain it. We have to take it into the shop, get new spark plugs, new oil, new filters. Okay, it has to be cared for the engine to operate properly. The same thing exists for the brain, but you have to know what it needs and how it works in order to help it perform at its best. Now, as far as when you're going to do that, the brain by nature resists anything new and different that it doesn't already know. And that is because its main job is to keep you safe. And so what it does is it relies on what it's already learned in order to create your current mental experience, because it knows that mental experience is safe and can keep you alive. Okay. So if we want something different, we have to teach the brain new things so it has more files, more inventory, more capability than it did before, so that it has more choices to go pull the mental experience from. Okay. So that's what really change is it's introducing new information to the brain and convincing the brain through a process of experiential evidence that the new way that we want to live, the new experiences we want to have, are better than the ones it already knows about. That is what rewiring the brain is all about from a kind of a big picture point of view.
Wow, you explained it so well, because you're absolutely right that, you know, our brain is not about learning new things. Its main function is to protect our well-being. And sometimes, especially like if we just go back to the history in the and understand the human evolution. So at that point in time when the caveman was there, it was all basically this. It's I would say animal instinct to actually save or protect the human being or protect ourselves from any danger. But in today's world, it's like a lot has changed. So now still our mind interprets the small threats as a threats to our well-being and a danger situation, and then again it start to run all those all those mechanisms to protect ourselves, which were helpful at those time as well, when the caveman was being attacked by a lion or something. But here, like now, we need to actually rewire our brain and to understand the situation well, that, you know, these situations may be threatening for our well-being, but it's the coping mechanism needs to be changed. It's not necessarily that we need to have the high level of cortisol to manage this kind of stresses. So I want to ask about it, that you talk about mental friction a lot. So just tell us about, educate our audience that what exactly is mental friction and how they can cope with mental frictions.
Yeah. You said a lot of great things in there that I would love to touch on also.
Sure. Sure.
But you're absolutely right that the brain was designed, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And it hasn't really changed that much since then. Yes, the prefrontal cortex that makes us as smart as we are has evolved and developed over time. But in terms of the design, what the brain is trying to do and accomplish, it's not really to get us a bigger house and more money, because those things didn't exist way back then. Now, those might be our goals, but what the brain is trying to do, and this is why it's so important to understand, is it's first and foremost trying to protect us so that we live and have babies so the species can continue. That's number one. In addition to that, it's trying to meet our needs. And we all have 6 core psychological needs that the brain is trying to always meet the best way that it can. Okay. And so the environment, as life has evolved and technology has improved, that has all changed, but the design of the brain is still kind of the same. Okay. So it's always going to default to those priorities. Okay. And so it's really helpful to understand that, because when we experience things mentally, we can look at that design and say, okay, well, this is why the brain is behaving in this way, because this is its design. And so all of a sudden, the more we dive deep into the inner workings of the brain and how it functions and what it's trying to do, it takes the mystery away. So we're not guessing like, well, why this and why that, and what do I do? And, you know, and the other thing is, you don't have to take any of it for granted or at face value. All of it is negotiable. So that's like super hopeful. Okay. So getting to your question about friction. So friction can onset. And when we talk about friction, it's really just things being harder than they feel like they should be. We feel grinding, tension, friction. Load, okay, where we know what life feels like without it. And so then when we have it, we're like, wow, that's harder than I would like it to be. Okay. And so the sources of that are kind of twofold. One is the mental resource side of the brain, and the other is the predictive mechanism of the brain. Okay. The mental resource side of the brain, your brain is like a tank of fuel, and it is a energy consumer hog. It weighs 2 to 3 pounds, but is consuming 25% of your resources. It is the hardest working organ of the brain. It is on 24/7, always working. When you are asleep, it is still working, doing certain functions. Okay. And so it's a consumer. It needs energy. It needs neurotransmitters. It needs attention. It needs bandwidth of various types. And it needs minerals and vitamins, all to function properly. But the thing is as it uses them while you're thinking and doing your life, it needs more, because there's no storage tanks. The brain is 2 to 3 pounds. And so it needs a steady supply of raw materials constantly throughout the day, especially when you're using it heavily during the day, to keep up. Otherwise, it will run out of fuel of various types. And when it runs out of fuel, it says, uh-oh. It's like the little gas light on your dashboard that goes yellow when you're about to run out of gas. It says, oh my God, Ambreen has asked, I've got so much left to do for her today, and she doesn't have enough fuel. What am I going to do? Well, what it does is calls the only reserve fuel that it knows of, and that's called stress. And so then it signals the adrenal glands and other organs in the body to produce cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and these chemicals come flooding into our brain and our body to help make up the deficiency of other resources, because there's nothing left. So if we are not eating properly at the right times, the right things that give the brain the ingredients that it needs to perform, if we are not hydrating with minerals properly, if we are not sleeping properly, if we are not exercising properly, if we are not taking regular breaks, if we are not managing the resource supply that our brain needs to be successful, we'll run out. And when that happens, the brain goes into activation mode, calls in stress, and you feel friction, fatigue, fog, load. Okay, that's the whole resource side of it. Now, the other part of that is you can then start to control how fast you spend those resources. There are things that how you conduct yourself in your mental life that will spend resources either slowly and efficiently or rapidly and inefficiently. And that's all part of what I teach, is setting up these lifestyles to give your brain what it needs and to spend efficiently. Because at the end of the day, you want, and for all the economists out there, you want neuroeconomic balance, supply and demand balance. You never want to have more demand than supply. As soon as your brain detects you have too much demand and not enough supply, it freaks out. It goes into threat mode, protection mode.
Yeah,
Friction.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I love the way you explained it, because it's I think to me it's very clear that it's not only that the friction that they usually talk about, that it's some beliefs and some behaviors that could actually resist, but you also like explain that the anatomy of actually the brain, that how these things are working, and the physiology of the brain, that why it actually runs out of resources so quickly, because if we keep on consuming more and more without adding a more resource, it will create more friction. So it's not only just that having those beliefs or something, and these things. So the other question is like actually linked to it. Like, you also often say that it's not only the mindset issue, which you almost quite kind of explained it, but I would like to actually put more light on it. That what can you explain the difference between the mindset and the brain-based challenge? That how one can, like, maybe if someone has created a very good mindset, but if they are facing some challenge from their from their brain, so how do you differentiate these two?
Okay, so this will take me into the second part of my answer. They relate to one another. Okay, so I just talked about the supply and demand of resources.
Yeah.
Okay, the other part of it is what you're talking about, is the mental experience.
Yeah.
Okay, now, have we ever wondered how is it that the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that come into our consciousness, why it's those? Why do those ones get there?
Yeah.
Okay, this is really important. So the brain predicts. If the brain didn't predict ahead of time, we would die almost assuredly tomorrow. So the brain, in order to protect us, has to be looking at the environment before we ever even experience the environment and predict what's about to happen in order to keep us safe. That is why, like when you're walking down the street, your brain is taking in information from your senses constantly that you're not even aware of it. It's surveying everything, bringing it into the brain and predicting what's about to happen so you don't get run over by a car. Okay? Now, so what the brain does to do that is it takes in data from your senses, compares it to your body to see how your body's feeling in response to what's coming in from the senses. So that's incoming data from the body and the environment. And then it assimilates it, filters out anything it doesn't deem important, and focuses on what it thinks is most important based on keeping you alive and what you have already established for it as meaningful. What you've already taught it is meaningful. Then what it does is it's like you go, if you're working on your computer and you need to grab a file, you go to that place in your computer and grab the file and bring it up, and voila, there it is. That's what the brain does. It takes in the data and goes to its file cabinets memory and says, what past experiences have I had in my life that I've already experienced that are most similar to this data set that's coming in right now from the environment in my body. So what do I think is going to happen, and what is the best, most confident way I feel like we should think, feel, and act in order to stay alive and in order to meet our needs? And that is the one that it picks out of the file cabinet. And so that is how your thoughts, how your mental life is constructed. That is why it's those thoughts, emotions, and actions that come up into your mind. So with that basis, we get to decide, is what the brain just picked out of the file cabinet, do we like it or not? We get to choose. Anything that the brain brings out of its file cabinet is its best guess. It's a prediction. It's not true. It's just a selection. So we get to decide how well the brain is predicting. And if we don't like it, we can change it. We can say, you know something, brain, I respect the fact that you went and got that file. I don't like it. Thank you very much. I am going to give you a new file that I want you to pick out instead. Okay. And so then what you and I would do is say, you come to me and you say, I don't like this thought that's coming up when this happens. Then we say, okay, great. We need to tell the brain that we don't like it, cause a prediction error, tell it that it's wrong. And then we need to design a new set of patterns, predictions that that we can install in the brain and teach it that we want this one instead, that it works better for us instead of the one that it's currently grabbing. Okay. And so by doing so, we are actually splicing in, rewiring the brain, splicing in a new piece of data that the brain, and then convincing the brain that we want that one instead of the old one. And if we do it right, before you know it, and we practice it enough and follow the right protocols for the brain to like it better, the brain will begin to pick that one instead. So here's the beauty of it. You ready? This is like so cool. We don't have to worry about mindset. Mindset is, we want to teach the brain what we want our mindset to be, so that the brain automatically and naturally brings it up into our consciousness without us having to work at it. As opposed to something bad just happened that I don't like in my mind, and so I have to change my mindset after the fact, in response, reacting to it. But just by changing your mindset, you don't reroute the root cause of why that thing came up in the first place.
Yeah.
You want to replace what it went and picked. That's completely different than mindset. So I don't work on mindset after the fact. I work on constructing new patterns that you can put in the place of the ones you don't like, and teaching the brain to pick that one instead of the one you don't like. That is where real, sustainable, lasting change occurs.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I mean, it's actually like reconstructing your mind, reconstructing your brain in a way, instead of like, just changing the beliefs or something. And what I really like about it is, like, it's not about the reactive, as you mentioned. It's more of a proactive strategy that, you predict it before, like, that you're teaching your brain that, okay, it may gonna happen. Then we need to prepare our brain to be able to face that situation. So that's a completely different strategy. And I really love that, because most of the time, like a lot of people, or especially when they focus more on the mindset, they talk about that, how to change the beliefs. And of course, these are also very important, that, there's no denying that it's not important, but it's more like, it's kind of a reactive. But this is completely a different technique, which brings more benefit.
Well, no, but beliefs are part of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So anything mental, a belief, a thought, emotions, I mean, they're all kind of always interwoven together as predictions. and they're brought together by the brain it's one pattern brought into our consciousness. But you can actually change your beliefs and install those in your brain. So, and that's exactly what we do to try to change predictions, because currently you have a certain set of beliefs that have thoughts attached to them, and the brain is using that model to predict what it's currently predicting. But you can reinterpret or rebelieve something differently, and then your brain can learn that. And if it's convinced that that way is better and meets your needs better and is less expensive metabolically and is more rewarding, if you can give it evidence that all of this works better than what it was using before, then it's more than happy to transition over. Okay. So all of this is up for negotiation, all of your beliefs, everything. Okay. It's just incredibly hopeful.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so this is very interesting actually conversation. I'm really loving it. The one thing that I really want to understand more about it, that this there are lots of high performers, and despite their motivation, they often feel that their work takes more efforts, and they feel that they're working hard. It's still that they're doing everything right, yet they are not keeping up, or they kind of deep down they feel they have self-doubts, they have low self-esteem or something of that sort. So what do you think, what is the main issue with them, and how to actually resolve that issue? Because we've seen that a lot of even high performance face these kind of, or struggle with these kind of challenges.
Okay. These are, again, patterns. So you mentioned self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
So self-esteem is really a byproduct of one of our psychological needs, which is significance. Do we feel that we matter? Do we feel that we're skillful? And so when the brain surfaces a pattern like I don't believe in myself, it's coming from somewhere. It has an origin somewhere. And so the brain is then, that is the file, to use our previous metaphor, that the brain is there's a context of, they're in their business world, and they have doubt, and they're overthinking, and they're not sure, and things feel heavy. And that's because the brain is not sure of what to predict, or it's predicting something that's uncertain. And so what it's doing is it's reaching into its file cabinet of patterns that it knows of and pulling out its best guess. And so what can happen is if it's not clear to the brain what to predict in that moment, it might predict multiple things, because there's not a clear, decisive prediction that it has. And so it starts to send multiple things into our brain because it's just unsure. Okay. And so that's where a lot of overthinking comes, is when we start getting a bunch of different things being sent into our consciousness by the brain because it's not certain. And so what we do is we try to dive deep into that pattern, what's going on in the moment, and try to break it down to try to create a new interpretation out of that context so that we can give the brain a better prediction. And so a lot of times when we're overthinking and in self-doubt, we need to do something to give the brain, to unstuck the brain. And so we either need to give it a new interpretation about the context that we're operating in. We need to take some kind of action to give the brain more data so that it can have more data to draw a better prediction, or we need to just accept something about the context. And because the brain is just constantly working, trying to figure out the prediction or the solution to the context that you're in. And so if it doesn't have a clear answer, a high priority prediction to pull from a file, then it keeps grinding, trying to solve the problem. And so we just need to take certain steps to clear up an answer for the brain, so at least it has something where it can stop working the problem in the background. And that's where that's a very expensive way to operate when you're not decisive and things are spinning in the background. Because going back to our resource tank analogy, the brain spends a lot of resources when it's working in the background and not resolving things. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's that you just said that there's lot of things happening in the brain, and which basically that's why our brain gets into the mode of overthinking. So I think that makes sense, that why people get stuck in overthinking, why people get have self doubt, because I think at that point in time, brain is unable to predict the new situation, so they get stuck in that they keep on trying to build the scenarios that it's going to happen like and they are afraid of taking some chance, some risk, or taking some chances that what's going to happen, because brain is kind of unable to predict. So
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so by understanding the science behind it, so let's say that we're in that situation and we're grinding and we can't come up with an answer and we can't make a decision, and we can just feel it's very costly. We're sucking energy constantly, and we're not able to get to other things because we're still stuck on this. So what we need to tell ourselves in that moment is, okay, hold on. My brain doesn't have a clear answer.
yeah.
So let's stop fighting it. We need to do one of three things. We either need to interpret the situation differently. We need to take some small action to give the brain more data. Like, we could ask ourselves, what's the next smallest step I could take to give my brain more data that would allow it to calm down for the moment and wait until the new data comes in. And so we just pick a small thing that we could do. Or we just need to accept something about the situation and stop working it and move on to something else. So we need to say, okay, the brain is stuck. It's grinding. That's not good. I'm wasting time and it's wasting energy. So I need to do one of these three things to get the brain unstuck so that it stops working this problem and we can move on to something else. Okay. So these are design-based strategies around how the brain is designed that we can then say, let's not fight the brain. Let's just give it what it needs for the moment, get it to calm down, get it out of protection mode, out of stress mode, deactivate our system, and so that we can move on, okay, for the sake of our overall performance. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be the highest performer every minute of every day sustainably. And so that doesn't mean always grind harder, work harder, because you're going to run out of energy much faster. It means managing the resources smartly, so that, and working with the brain's design so that you can do this every day for the long haul, and not get burned out, not get overwhelmed, not let this friction build and accumulate over and over, on and on and on, okay, until it gets really bad. So this is about managing the organs so that it's a high functioning engine every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the main thing, I guess, to managing the resources. But when we look around, a lot of people actually, I see, especially at the corporate level, people have normalized stress and overthinking. They think that taking the stress is something very normal, and even at the corporate level. At when I was at the corporate level, my stress was very high. Like, especially, like, I could feel that even not only I see that, like, even the entire department, the different departments have different levels of stress, and it was like a normal thing. It's okay. I mean, when you know that you are working in such a so and so company, that means the stress would be high. So it's normal thing. So people have normalized this stress. But what do you think, that how can someone tell that when it has crossed into something dangerous, or maybe has crossed the boundary, or something that they need to take some action?
Well, we understand the neuroscience of stress in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's a resource that can be called momentarily to deal with the situation. So it's almost like we come upon something, like if you're going to run a long race, you're going to need to call in stress in order to help you rise to that moment. But then what we want to do is, after the moment has passed, we want to let stress go away so that we can recover. Because it's very similar. If you were always in stress and it's normalized, it's like sitting in your driveway with your car on and revving the engine with it still in park.
Yeah.
So when you say normalize, I mean, I guess that's a cultural thing, but the problem is the brain doesn't agree with you or anyone that says it's normal. And so, it's normal if you use it strategically and correctly, bring it in, utilize it, let it go away so that everything can calm it back down and reset. Because you're when you sleep, your brain needs to reset. So all day long, it's busy, getting noisy, inflaming, using resources. And at night, what happens is everything resets. So the bandwidth that's been expired during the day resets. So you have full capacity again in the morning. Fluid called lymphatic fluid comes up from the body into the brain and washes all the toxins out and harmful proteins. Memories get consolidated from short term into long term. There's a bunch of maintenance that happens at night. Okay. But if we are always in stress, even like heading into bed, then those processes don't happen normally at night. We don't get into deep enough sleep because the brain is still in stress mode, activated, looking for threats that could go wrong. And so we really need to manage this brain in the way that it's meant to be managed, not because culture tells us stress is normal. I'm sorry, but it's not. It's okay if you're using it strategically, but using it as a badge of honor or a badge of ego, okay, if that's how you want to go, that's fine. But it always ends up in the same place, and that's overwhelm, burnout, anxiety, depression. The longer it goes unattended to and unmitigated, and you just feel this friction constantly, right? And so it's just a matter of understanding what the brain is, how it brings in stress, why we should use it when we use it, how to get rid of it, and just manage it.
Yeah, that's I absolutely agree with you that normalizing stress is not the solution. It's like, but using stress strategically is, as you said, that there is always stress, like especially when there are certain times when you can't avoid stress, but managing stress is more important because resetting ourselves is more important. And there are techniques, like as you said, that having a right proper sleep, doing some meditation, or doing some other things, just simply like walk, can help you reduce the stress. And doing any other activities like this can help reduce stress. So like in during the day, when there is no escape from this stress, yes, we need to face it, but we need to again reset ourselves to face the same challenges or the different type of challenges, or at least which can cause stress in a better way, because otherwise it will always end up as burnout. So that's perfectly, you said it very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It always ends up in the same place. And so, there's just this, the ultimate objective is to get the most productivity we can out of ourselves every day without burden, without friction, and have it last forever. And so it really is this management of the organ. How do I give it the most resources I can give it? How do I spend what I have efficiently? And how do I interpret the environment in such a way that the brain doesn't view it as threatening or uncertain? Because that's a lot of this gets down to how we interpret certain situations. Like when we go up on stage, when we go into a meeting with our boss, when we have to go into a sales call. It's how is the brain interpreting that moment as to what the brain needs to get through that as far as a performance, a strategy. And so if we could interpret things as not as threatening and work on that, or as opportunities and challenges instead of threats, the physiological response to that is completely different. And so that's what we're doing, is always trying to reevaluate how our brain is interpreting things so that we can change those interpretations or beliefs, as you call them, so that the brain reacts differently. It reacts more pleasantly. You know, let's say, I'm sure we can all reflect on things in our life that were really hard and scary, and then we got better at them. That is the brain experiencing something enough to where it gets comfortable with it and now views it completely differently than it ever did. And so that is a change of the brain's interpretation, and it goes from threat to confidence and opportunity. And so that's what we want to work on with everything. Anything that we encounter in our lives that make us feel uncomfortable, where the brain is detecting uncertainty or threat, we want to look at that as information, not be overwhelmed by it, and say, well, what about this can I do to change the brain's opinion on how it's viewing this? And that's what we work on then, is giving the brain gentle exposure to a different story or belief or interpretation about this context that is going to help it look at it differently, so that our resources are spent more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about seeing things from a different perspective, and the entire physiological, not only our belief system, but the entire internal physiology change as well. Just
Yes.
telling our mind that, when we are feeling having those fear, or maybe when we feel less confident and less
Yep.
excitement, and if we just tell our brain that it's not a fear, it's just the excitement. When we change the interpretation, our brain is start to behave completely differently. So that's really amazing. I mean, it's fascinating that how everything changes, just a matter of changing the interpretation. So yeah, that's really
100%.
fascinating.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And so that could be our lifetime goal, is to just take what the brain experiences as information. Really, we could just look at everything and say, okay, well, that's information. It's just, I don't like the information so much. I wish it was different. But now we know from our experience with other things that we've overcome, that we can overcome this. And that's what we try to do with the brain, is give it other examples of other things that we've done in life that were hard and uncertain at the time, but we got through it. And so we just look at that as a case study, and then the brain begins to calm down, because it says, oh, okay, that's what resilience is. And so resilience is, things are uncertain, but I've gotten through many other things like it before. And so I know that I can get through it. And so the brain begins to say, no matter what, how bad it looks or how threatening it seems, I know I can get through it. And that's, the more times we get through situations, reinterpret them, develop skill sets around them, the brain starts to get trained to be good at interpreting things differently. It's like a skill.
Yeah.
New interpretation development is a skill, and the brain can get really good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation, and I know that we can go on and on about this, because this is one of my favorite subject, and I would love to know more, but unfortunately the time is running out. So before we close the show, I would just say that what one piece of advice would you like to give to our audience today to achieve the optimal level of their brain?
It really starts with education. I am telling you, with personal experience, and for myself and also seeing in other people, once you start to understand how the brain works and how it's designed and why it behaves the way it does, a whole bunch of your mental experience starts to make sense. You will begin to calm down just by virtue of the knowledge. And then you then will have agency and control over shaping and directing your mental experience going forward. You will have as much control over that as you do over your business or your relationships, or, and so there's just so much enthusiasm and hope, but it really does start with taking the time to learn this basic fundamental information about your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes a lot of difference when we are just aware of how these how our brain interpret the information, how and why we behave the way we behave. It makes everything begin to make sense, and and we actually are able to be in more control instead of like going on an autopilot mode, that how the brain is running the show, instead of so instead of we running the show. So I think it is very important that we take back the control by understanding that how the brain is working. I love that advice. And if people who are listening to the show, or maybe they're watching it, the recordings, how they can contact you if they want to connect with you.
Yeah, my website is georgehaymaker.com.
Yeah.
Haymaker's Haymaker. And
Okay.
there's all kinds of links on there to get a hold of me to have a conversation. I do brain performance and reset retreats here in Napa Valley. I do coaching of different types, all kinds of ways to work together. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. I think I haven't added your website in the comment, but I will do that after I finish the show. And thank you so much for sharing these amazing insights about neuroscience and brain and psychology, which is my favorite topic. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure our audience must have learned a lot from you today. So thank you so much for coming to my show and sharing this wonderful insights.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, and great to meet all your guests.
Thank you.